What's going on, Reject Nation? We're gonna watch some film theory today. Matt Pat back at it. How Wonder Woman doomed humanity. Wonder Woman 1984. I went on a hike, just got back. I had to be wearing my Wonder Woman shirt, so I was like, this is a sign. This is a sign to cover Film Theory's latest video. Let's do this.
You know, sometimes it feels like as soon as I make a prediction theory, the studios re-edit the movies just to spite me. Like the time I called Rey a Palpatine and then episode 8 was like, no, she's not. She's a nobody. And then there are those other times I'm 100% absolutely sure that nobody in Hollywood's listening to me. And today is one of those days. But hey, that's just a... Here, let's talk about Wonder Woman.
I feel like you're almost 100% right about your Batman one.
Hello, Internet!
Welcome
to Film Theory, the show that's now doing sequels to its own theories. Dedicated fans may remember back in 2017, when I ran a theory that Wonder Woman would never have made it from Themyscira to London in time for the end of World War I. The TLDR of that theory was basically that her boat was too slow, and the available waterways to get her there weren't helping the situation. Link is in the upper right-hand corner of the screen in case you missed that one. I personally liked that episode a whole heck of a lot. Anyway, at the time I thought Zack Snyder was to blame for the shoddy math, but I guess now it's time to apologize. I'm sorry, Zach. Don't get me wrong, it's not because the math makes any more sense now than it did back then. Still doesn't, just a huge turd sandwich of a job on the math on that one. But the reason I'm apologizing is because Zack Snyder had nothing to do with the newest DC movie, Wonder Woman 1984, and wouldn't you know it, there's still another major math issue with the travel in this new film, which, gotta say, it's ironic, considering the whole theme of the movie is not cheating to get ahead, and, well, they cheated the math to, you know, get ahead.
You cheated, that is the only truth, and truth is all there is.
Now, because the movie's new and not everybody has access to HBO Max, I'm gonna try to minimize the spoilers. I'm not gonna talk about the end of the movie or any major twists, but here's your minor spoiler warning for the first third of the film. In a scene that's been featured in every trailer, Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor get into a fighter jet in DC and fly it non-stop to Cairo, Egypt. I'm here to tell you that in this movie full of massive plot holes, this is probably the biggest, Diana and Steve would have probably died in a fiery ball of death before ever finishing the trip.
The truth is what powers it, not me. The truth is bigger than all of us.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way, Diana, because your movie certainly disagrees. So let's set the scene here. Diana and her once dead but now brought back to life boyfriend Steve are hunting down an ancient artifact known as the Dreamstone, which has the ability to grant wishes, kind of, when it feels like it. But it takes something in return, maybe. Also,
Full Metal
feels like it. Admittedly, the mechanism of this thing is a bit inconsistent. Probably a theory for another day. Anyway, Diana the last person she knew had possession of the Dreamstone, a failing oil baron named Maxwell Lord. Max is on a trip to Cairo, Egypt to secure huge oil reserves from one of the most oil-rich men in the world. Since Steve Trevor technically died back in 1918, he doesn't have himself a valid passport, so they can't just hop on a commercial flight. So how do you get to Egypt? You steal an airplane.
You cheated, Diana.
No, that's not cheating. That's just borrowing from an unconsenting party for an indeterminate amount of time. Now, this theory isn't about stupid plot holes, and it's important to remember that a character not thinking of something doesn't count as a plot hole. But before we move forward, I just gotta say it, they bring Steve back to life by having him be in another man's body. Like, he is one dude, and he says, hey, I'm Steve at a party, and Diana doesn't recognize him, but then a minute later, she starts seeing him as Steve, but to the rest of the world, he's still this other guy. It's creepy. It has disturbing implications about Steve and Diana's relationship all throughout the movie, but ignoring all of that, possessed dude probably had himself a valid passport. Just saying, you could have saved yourself some trouble just by checking. Anyway, they walk right into what we're told is the Smithsonian Archives and steal one of the fighter jets on exhibit, taking off for a romantic flight using the airstrip that is somehow right outside the building. Alright, so the actual Smithsonian Archives are here.
I thought this video wasn't about plot holes.
You gotta get a few in there, just for good measure.
Off on the ground, it seems unlikely that that's really where they are. In reality, I think they're instead at the Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center just outside of Washington, which is a Smithsonian-affiliated museum with direct access to Dulles International Airport. It's a minor point, but I just wanted to call it out. So Steve, a former fighter pilot from the 1910s, is amazed that modern planes can fly so far.
How is this so fast? You have a plane that can fly from here to Cairo in one shot.
And of course, there are plenty of planes that can make it that far. The distance from Dulles Airport to Cairo, Egypt is 5,800 2,822 miles, or 9,369 kilometers. And the longest regularly scheduled flight in the world is Singapore Airlines' direct flight from Singapore to Newark, New Jersey, at a length of 9,534 miles, or 15,343 kilometers.
Uncomfortable.
18-hour flight.
But actually, no. 5,822 miles may not be close to the longest flight on Earth, but it's still a very long flight. And most planes aren't made for anything nearly that long. And there's one key reason why.
Fuel.
It should surprise anyone. It's a lot of gas. But fuel is heavy, and the more fuel you have on board, the fewer passengers, cargo, and other things you can carry. This means that all planes are made with a trade-off between fuel and utility. Of course, fighter jets only have 1 or 2 passengers, and their cargo is mostly munitions, but fighter jets are also made to be highly maneuverable. The more fuel you have stored in your wings, the more you have to worry about your ability to make sharp maneuvers, and the more you have to deal with fuel distribution to keep your weight constantly balanced on a knife's edge. This means that most fighter jets don't have themselves marathon ranges. So which fighter jet are we dealing with here? Well, the plane the production team used for the exterior shots is a modified RAF Panavia Tornado. It's a British plane, but there's a major issue with that. The seating arrangement. You see, the Tornado seats pilots in tandem, one pilot forward and the second one behind, not the side-by-side seating arrangement that we see in the movie. Many fighter jets choose to do this because it's a more aerodynamic arrangement, requiring less frontal area. From a design standpoint, it's much easier to stretch the nose of the plane out a bit to add a second position rather than making the whole thing wider. Because of the manufacturing and aerodynamic issues, side-by-side seating in fighter jets is actually a fairly rare thing, with the F-111 being one of the few models that featured it. The Soviets were bigger fans of the side-by-side seating arrangement than most. For instance, their Su-24 would have had side-by-side seating that looks a lot more like the cockpit shots from Wonder Woman. In reality, the plane that we see in the movie...
Russian traitors.
Russian tampering with the film.
could have been decently bigger. But it turns out none of this really matters, because none of those planes are making it anywhere close to Cairo. Remember, the trip from Dulles to Cairo is 5,822 miles, 9,369 kilometers. So how do these titans of air superiority stack up? Terribly. Because fighter aircraft have different ranges depending on whether they're going into battle or cruising, there are usually 2 different ranges associated with each type of craft. The combat range, which is the range of the plane when it's loaded for combat, and the ferry range, which is the range of the aircraft when it's carrying its...
When it's loaded for ferry.
It's pretty surprising to me that the Smithsonian would just keep a plane around with a full tank of gas just in case someone happened to steal it and tried to fly it to Egypt, but it doesn't look like they're loaded with live ammo, so I'm going to be going off of the ferry range. Assuming the plane is the Panavia Tornado that we see in the exterior shots, the ferry range is 2,650 miles, 4,264 kilometers. It's not even half the distance it needs to make it to Cairo. The Su-24 does way worse with a ferry range of 1,724 miles, 2,774 kilometers, and the F-111 can do a bit better at 3,690 miles.
I thought there were no more plot holes to uncover.
The plane has some of them, but not all of them. And again, they're still 2,200 miles short.
Jesus.
That means that not only will these planes not make it to Cairo, they're not even making it to Africa. Even if we wanted to win things in their favor, Diana and Steve are doomed. The closest point in America to Africa
one of those
actually
bolts.
isn't where you'd expect. It's not down in Florida where you might think, but way up on the Quaddy Head Peninsula of Maine. Yeah, Maine is the closest state to Africa. Wrap your head around that one. Anyway, this point in Maine is 3,154 miles away from Africa. Barely within the best case scenarios range, the F-111 with maximum extra fuel tanks. They're not even going to come close to making landfall. Diana and Steve are doomed to drop in the ocean, invisible, never to be found again. Remember, the reported max ranges of these planes are optimized maximums, assuming standard temperature and pressure, as well as well-trained pilots. And you see, that's your second problem. Steve is not a well-trained pilot. Sure, he was probably one of the best pilots of World War I, but in 1984, aviation has made some major advances.
Is that a plane?
Really inspiring some confidence in your abilities there, bud. In World War I, pilots were given about 50 hours of training and had an average life expectancy of 69 flight hours after that. That means that Steve Trevor probably had around 100 to 120 hours of flight experience at most, and had only ever flown in non-pressurized, propeller-driven aircraft. The fact that Steve could figure out a modern jet enough to get it off the ground is a miracle, but making the plane fly optimally is a whole nother issue. Steve is not making for a great pilot here, and we know that because the first thing he does is fly through
fireworks.
Fireworks tend to explode between 50 and 300 feet, meaning that at most, Steve Trevor is flying at
I love this. This is so ridiculous.
Low altitude to fly. And aside from being incredibly dangerous,
I love how detailed this
not
is.
efficient. Airplanes aren't climbing to a cruising altitude of 30,000 feet to beat the traffic. It's actually more efficient for a plane to fly at higher altitudes. It's because the air gets thinner as you get higher, which actually grants two benefits to the plane. First, and probably the one you've already guessed, there's less air resistance in front of the plane, meaning that it can push forward with less effort. The second benefit comes from the way air and fuel combine to create combustion. In an engine, fuel is always flowing into chambers, being compressed by pistons and exploding. The size of that explosion depends highly on how much air is also in the chamber when the explosion happens. At higher altitudes where the air is thinner, you actually need a higher volume of that thinner air to create the optimal explosion to drive the engine. Airplanes have the ability to change the mixture of air and fuel at will to create optimized engine output. The higher you go, the leaner you can make your mixture, which can save up to 25% on total gas usage.
Wow, so much thought goes into flying.
It's not that easy.
These planes that could only get up to 11 or 12,000 feet before they stopped working, so he'd probably consider that high altitude travel. Above 12,500 feet today, the FAA requires pilots to have oxygen on board. So even if a plane in World War I could have made it above that altitude, the pilots would be passing out in their open, depressurized cockpits. This is going to be far below the optimal altitude for any modern jet. Even the highest altitude aircraft of World War I, German bombers, reached at absolute most 24,000 feet. Better, but still far below optimal cruising altitudes for long distance.
I really love the way
All
these
this
are
is to say
edited.
that Steve and Diana don't have a chance of making it, but you know what? Forget all of this. Throw away the flight ranges, the plane types, Steve's lack of flying experience. None of it matters. Even if they had a plane that could go the distance and a pilot with experience to get them there, there's one thing they can't avoid: getting shot out of the air.
Fight. Your gift. I'll never understand it.
That's not the only thing you don't understand, Diana. I don't understand how radar works. You see, stealing a plane is kind of a big deal. So when Steve and Diana hit the runway with the purloined plane, alarms start going off. The control tower is notified that, hey, some unidentified aircraft is on the runway and about to take off. Don't worry, Steve's an ace pilot that's gonna outrun him.
The way I fly, they will never find us.
Wait, it's the 80s now, and there's been a new innovation in the world of flight tracking called radar.
Radar. I can't explain now, but they'll see us anywhere, even in the dark.
To escape detection at the last minute, Diana uses her incredibly ill-defined power set to, you know, turn the jet invisible. It's a fun nod to the old Wonder Woman comics and TV show where the invisible
probably
jet was
wouldn't
just
work.
a quirky thing. And sure, you could use a magical cloaking ability to hand wave away the authorities tracking you down and shooting your plane out of the sky. It's all magic. Why should radar work on a magical plane? Well, that excuse would have worked, except they made one key mistake. They flew through fireworks. See, the movie shows us the invisible plane as it flies through fireworks and clouds, carving its shape through the air.
Oh, you clever duck, you.
Radar. You see, the word radar stands for radio detection and ranging, and it is designed to be used specifically for things when they are hard to see. The really simple explanation is that radar sends out radio waves, which then bounce off of a physical object and go back to the receiver, telling that receiver that, hey, there is an object there. We've covered all this before in a past Sonic the Hedgehog movie theory. That is the basics of radar, and that alone would show that an object able to push clouds and fireworks out of the way.
I was literally going like, but they turned it invisible.
But we have to take it one step further, because when it comes to control towers
Yeah, it's
following
radio
an airplane's
waves.
movement, there is an added wrinkle. Once your plane takes off, your pilot activates a transponder device inside the aircraft. The transponder detects incoming radar signals and broadcasts an encoded radio signal back with flight number, altitude, airspeed, destination, information like that. A blip representing the airplane.
Wasn't
now
Patty
appears on
Jenkins'
the
dad a
radar
pilot?
screen.
Yes, I believe he was.
Regardless of
He
whether
was
Steve
not
flipped the switch
consulted.
on or not, the fact that the control tower saw the plane on its radar means that it was on and wouldn't just go away because the plane is no longer visible. Sure, Diana might know more about 80s culture than Steve, but she certainly doesn't seem to know any more about 80s scientific advancements. Any way you slice this one, that rogue aircraft is going to be shot down out of the sky long before it gets anywhere close to Africa. For the second time in as many movies, movies, Wonder Woman has failed us because of a basic transportation-related miscalculation. In the last movie, Wonder Woman would have just been too late to save the day. But this time, her boyfriend's lack of knowledge about modern jet fighters would result in both of them plummeting into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The theme of the movie was to not cheat to get ahead, but, you know, maybe the theme should have been do your research before you try and cheat. And for DC or any of the writers of these movies, please, if anyone is over there listening, please think about this next time. So far, my 2 Wonder Woman theories have all been about transportation, science, boats, and planes. I'd love to do a theory about the lore next time. Or maybe how this universe ties into the 1970s Wonder Woman series. The last thing I want to do is ruin the next movie by, I don't know, pointing out that Wonder Woman's rocket will never
so
make it to
funny.
orbit.
This is
But
the best.
hey,
So
that's
funny.
just a
Theory.
Oh,
Film
Jesus.
theory. And you should consider subscribing to see when Wonder
Oh, I
Woman
am.
3 does
For
come
sure.
out, because it was just confirmed, what horrific miscalculation we're going to expose in that one. Subscribe button is right below this video. It's bright and red and happy for a bright red start to 2021. Help this channel cross the 10 million subscribers.
How is it not at
Really
10 million yet?
deserve a diamond play button, and you know what?
50
You deserve
million.
weekly content delivered to your timeline.
Anything
That's
less
just
is unacceptable.
incredible. Wonderful, like Wonder Woman. Wonderful like Wonder Woman. Alright, I'm done.
Guys, if you haven't subscribed to Film Theory, what are you doing?
These are magical.
What are you doing? Do it, guys, do it. I love the experience of this one specifically because my mind just started going off of so many things. I think like a lot of us, we probably walked into here going, okay, all right, we've heard a lot about plot holes with Wonder Woman 1984. The video is called How Wonder Woman Doomed Us? Was that the exact title was called? How Wonder Woman Doomed Humanity. So I'm like, all right, there's probably gonna be some crazy thing about the magic or some choice that she
be the
made.
lore.
Yeah, it's gonna deal with that. And what you do is you get this entire gigantic breakdown of just this plane moment. The plane moment's been criticized constantly, right? And we've been part of that camp too. Like, how did they just get away with it? Did they ever return the plane? Was the guy, whoever Steve Trevor was posing as, was he hunted down by the FBI afterwards for stealing the plane? A whole bunch of things. How did he learn? How did he know how to fly the plane? It doesn't make any sense. And then a lot of people go, you guys are just nitpicking. The vibe that I got from this video, which was making me laugh so much, I felt like someone told Matt, and then like Film Theory has like several writers, but I felt like someone told Matt, Pat, you're nitpicking. And then he got like super defensive. And it was like, let me show you how this is not
show
nitpicking.
you exactly
Let me show
why
you
this is a
how
relevant
all of this
plot
does not
hole.
work at all.
This is nonsense.
Sometimes you walk into Film Theory, like the one I mentioned during this was the Batman one with Robert Pattinson. You listen to those, you're like, man, I actually could see that being the actual plot and what the twist might be for that Batman movie. I walked into here thinking a similar thing, and I just love the self-awareness too. Like, I love to talk about the lore one of these days, but I can't get past some of these very obvious things to him and the team's mind, technicalities of things in the real world that would not apply. So I had just a hoot watching this. It's so freaking fun. Like, yes, well detailed, well constructed, well thought out, wonderfully edited. The whole concept of it from beginning to end just became so funny to me.
Well, yeah, and plus it's just a great like physics, aeronautics, and engineering like breakdown digest for anybody who doesn't know much about that side of science. Because I was sitting here like getting engrossed and forgetting like, oh yeah, this is about how Wonder Woman doomed humanity, which is I guess with a fiery plane crash miscalculating terribly this flight. It's funny to me that talking about not wanting to nitpick leads to like the nittiest pick, but then when you hear it unpacked, it is so like legitimate in a way because it is just like the physics of actual technology and actual Earth. So I feel like those things are kind of fair to harp on, especially like I wonder.
No pun intended.
I know there was a lot of push and pull behind the scenes of that movie that's talk coming out, and I wonder how Patty Jenkins felt about some of these plane things because you brought up like her dad was a pilot and she's got to know something about this stuff.
Well, I mean, I think even if just because her dad is a pilot wouldn't mean that she is an expert, right? I get that. My mom is the manager of an insurance company and I know barely anything about insurance, all right? So I can't act like just because your dad is, but I feel like she would at least have the resources and know the right people to talk to when trying to figure this stuff out. I didn't even think about majority of this stuff. I didn't even bother to really question, could the plane make it? That wasn't really one of my main concerns. I'm like, movies get away with crap like travel and distance all the time. So like something I didn't even bother to to question. Like, I love just how the more detailed he went, he just kept explaining how not one piece of this works. Not one piece. Not one piece of it. We're like, even at the end, when they go, let's scrap all that. Let's just say, forget all that. Let's say you had all the maximum fuel. Let's say you had all this, all this, all this, all this. The moment that a lot of people did love was the fireworks moment. And then he brings up how that immediately would have gotten them detected on the radar, and how in the film itself, beyond the photos that they gave up before they got to the fireworks, how like when they're zipping through the clouds, it's bringing the outline of them. Oh damn, that's so true. Even the magical moment about like, oh, but that's what makes it. I just love that. It's so funny.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, in the moment, I guess you could chalk it up to magic, but the thought had crossed my mind, like, making the jet invisible is not just gonna automatically make sounds not bounce off of it, because that's how radar works. And yeah, like, at the time I was just, flying through fireworks seemed like a risky idea, just because what if one of them hits you? But yeah, I never thought of that aspect of making it that much more obvious and pointing out your location and stuff. Again, nitpicking, except when they start to, like, pile up like this, it starts to suggest that maybe you just don't have a well-constructed scene.
I thought we have uncovered from everything we've thought about, from the questions and everything you guys have posed, all the countless videos I've seen on Wonder Woman 1984. I must have heard everything by this.
There'll be more for
Apparently
years to come. People will scour this movie and find other things.
This was so freaking hilarious. Hilarious in all the different kinds of ways. It's not just funny because of the jokes, just the entire thing is funny because of what it's so focused on.
It's like, it's funny, but it's also engrossing because you're like learning stuff and they're like great. The editing is great. Like, it's a perfect little package.
So yeah, I do gotta say, like, thank you to the Film Theory team for putting this together. And guys, if you haven't subscribed to them, do it. What are you waiting for? All right, guys, well, subscribe, click that notification bell, hit that like button. We'll catch you guys soon.